Hi, good evening. I'd like to welcome you to Poem Praise 2, and peace and blessings be upon you and your family this evening. Now, we are going to get right back into Black Stars, African American women writers. We're currently on Ida B. Wells-Barnett. During the time period of 1862 to 1931. And here is her picture. You see her. So without further ado, let us go ahead and get into this. And it reads as such. The Civil War in no way ended injustice toward African Americans. Blacks needed people to speak out and speak up for their new rights. One of the most courageous voices was that of Ida B. Wells-Barnett, a crusading journalist and an early feminist. Ida, the eldest of Lily Bell and James Wells' 8 children, was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi, just 6 months before President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing all the slaves in the Confederacy. Her parents rejoiced in her freedom. James Wells became a leader in the Freedmen's Bureau, an organization established by the government in 1865 to help former slaves rebuild their lives. He and Lizzie Bell also helped set up a school for black children. Northern church ministries, many of whom made great sacrifices, entering the hostile atmosphere of the South, came to help. Ida was one of their first students. All these positive experiences made Ida feel strong and confident. So she was prepared when tragedy struck. At age 16, Ida's childhood ended abruptly. Both her parents and her youngest brother died of a yellow fever epidemic in 1878. Ida became responsible for her siblings. After graduating from Rust, a high school industrial school in Holly Springs, Mississippi, and passing the teacher's exam, she began a career as a teacher, earning $25 per month. Later, she moved to Memphis for a higher paid position. Wells somehow found time to attend classes at Fisk, a historically black college, which led to another big change in her life. She discovered journalism. She wrote for the student newspaper. She also became editor of the Evening Star and the Living Way, 2 black church publications. The more jobs she had, the more money she could send home to her family. Using a pen named Iola from her friend Frances Harper novel, Wells often wrote about race. She frequently got her subject matter from her own personal experience. For example, she refused to sit in the Jim Crow car on a train in the South. She sued the railroad company and won. But her case was later overturned by a Tennessee state court. She wrote about the railroad lawsuit in the church publications. She also wrote about the inequality between the public education of the black children and that of white children in the South. By 1891, local white politicians learned that Wells was the writer behind the politically charged articles, and she was fired from her teaching position. Not to be silenced, Wells purchased part interest in newspaper, the Memphis Free speech. She became editor and eventually sole owner. As African Americans struggled to establish their rightful place in America at the turn of the century, whites grew increasingly resentful. Mob violence became commonplace. Envy over blacks who attempted to build decent housing for themselves, and anger over blacks competing for jobs and establishing businesses were only some of the resentments that exploded into senseless assaults on black lives. In March 1892, 3 black businessmen were lynched in Tennessee for attempting to establish a grocery store that competed with one owned by a white merchant. Local papers asserted that the cause of the lynchings was an assault by Negro men on a white woman. The outraged and brave Ida B. Wells dared to write in response, "Nobody in this black section believes that old tread bear lie." Wells asserted instead that the lynchings were to discourage the financial independence of blacks and the idea that white women could be interested in black men. These statements brought out a mob. Fortunately, she was away visiting Francis Harper at the time. Not only was the Office of Free Speech destroyed, but Wells' partner J.C. Fleming was run out of town, and Wells was warned not to return. Establishing herself in New York, she continued her crusade against racial injustice in a newspaper, the New York Age, of which she later became editor and part owner. Publication of a Red Record, 1895, one of many pamphlets she wrote, helped raise public awareness and action. The tone and writing style of a Red Record would be repeated years later in the speeches of civil rights advocates such as Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. When blacks were barred from participation in the Chicago World's Fair, Wells joined Frederick Douglass and others in leading a protest campaign. She also began a campaign to have the word Negro capitalized in the press, pointing out that French, German, Dutch, and Japanese were always capitalized. In 1895, she married Ferdinand Barnett, a Chicago lawyer and editor of the Chicago Conservator. The couple became partners in social action. Ida B. Wells Barnett is reported to have crusaded with all 4 of her children when they were infants, nursing them along the way. A founding member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. In 1898, she presented to President William McKinley resolutions drafted against lynching. She organized one of the first African American suffrage groups, and in 1930 co-founded the National Association of Colored Women and the National Afro-American Council. She also ran as an independent candidate for Illinois' state senator. By the time of her death in Chicago on March 25, 1931, she was known nationally and internationally. Her autobiography, Crusade for Justice, edited by her daughter, Alfreda M. Duster, was published in 1970. And that does complete Ida B. Wells Barnett. I do have a little section right here at the bottom I haven't read, but I'm going to read that to you real quick here. A writer discovers her style. Ida B. Wells' writing was very plain and direct. On her decision to write this way, she said, "I had an instinctive feeling that the people who had little or no school training should have something coming into their homes weekly, which dealt with their problems in a simple, helpful way." So in Weekly Letters to the Living Way, I wrote in plain, common sense way on the things which concern our people. That does complete Ida B. Wells-Barnett. Stay tuned for part 3 into the new century. So I want you to be well, take care, be it thy will, I will speak with you soon here on Poem Praise 2 for our next upcoming woman writer. There she is, a picture of her. I'll just give you a preview. Would you like to know who that is? So let's turn the page back. I'll let you know. That's Jessie Redmond Fawcett. So till next time, take care. And till then, later, y'all.